My name is Jeanette Andersen. I am the chair of Lupus Europe. I have lupus myself, and I'm your trained patient expert on medicines research and development. I'm also the leader of the Lupus Europe Patient Advisory Network. So to give you a bit of background, Lupus Europe is the European umbrella organization that brings together national lupus patient organizations from across Europe. We are a non-profit, independent organization. We aim to support and empower our national organization members, sharing information with them and trying to promote better patient-centered processes, both within the healthcare field and at the political level. So we also work tirelessly on improving access to healthcare for all lupus patients, advocating on their behalf at EU level. And to tell you a bit about the Patient Advisory Network, which I'm leading, it's a team of trained and energized, experienced patients living with lupus, appointed by Lupus Europe to act as liaison and resource to value-adding scientific projects, clinical trials, and other research-related projects. A lot of things has happened during the last decades. But one of the things that missing is definitely new therapies. So having therapies for lupus patients. We've been used to having a lot of products being used off-label and not really with big success. We still have a lot of patients who rely on steroids to go through every day. And we all know they have huge side effects. And we really need to get rid of those. We also have a lack of awareness of SLE, both amongst the general public, but also amongst the healthcare professionals. And that means that it often takes a long time to get a diagnosis. Globally, the time to diagnosis is right now 3 to 7 years. And if you have a prior diagnosis, for instance, of fibromyalgia or depression, that increases even more. So finding the right pharmacological and also the right non-pharmacological care that helps people with lupus minimize the burden of their lupus is really needed. There's also a lack of information about the disease for the patients. So patient involvement in the management of their care is really lacking, and it can lead to greater patient empowerment and adherence to treatment and improved outcomes if patients are involved in their own care. So new standards of care in SLE are urgently needed to achieve greater disease control and to improve patient outcomes. First, I want to explain a bit about what guidelines are, because they are tools not only for healthcare professionals to learn how to manage lupus in the best possible way, but it's actually also used by general practitioners to learn more about the disease, when to act on something and when to leave it to the more professional people, and actually also for patients. So patients can read the guidelines or the lay version of the guidelines, which also always comes afterwards, and they know what to demand of their lupus treatments and what they should expect. So the last guidelines we had for lupus was in 2019. Normally for many other diseases, there are guidelines every year. These guidelines for lupus have been coming more rarely because there haven't been a lot of new treatment options. The hope is now that there will be a change for lupus because so many new therapies are in the pipeline and so many things seems to be happening for lupus at this moment. The good thing about these new guidelines are that patient perspectives are being taken much more into consideration. For instance, this time I have been invited as a patient with lupus to give my input to the guidelines, and I'm actually a co-author on the guidelines. And this is the first time this has happened for lupus. So I think that alone is a big achievement. It's also clear that whatever input I gave as a patient has been taken into account and embedded into the guidelines. Also, it was my feeling when we had a discussion in the task force behind the guidelines that physicians were much more aware of patient wishes and taking patients into account. It can be seen by the guidelines that came out of it afterwards. So it's emphasized in the guidelines that the lupus treatment should be a multidisciplinary treatment, individualized management for each patient, and there's an emphasis on patient education and shared decision making between patient and physician. And those things haven't been mentioned before. It's also clear in the guidelines that when you give a patient treatment, you should take into consideration the cost, not only to the patient, but also to society. So knowing in which country the patient lives and if that treatment makes sense in this instant. There's also been a big emphasis on non-pharmacologic interventions, including sun protection, smoking cessation, healthy, balanced diet, and regular exercise, and measures to promote bone health, as we know can be a problem when you take steroids. So long-term outcomes have been a really big focus. Now, if we talk about the pharmacologic interventions, there's now been some new guidelines on what you should do. So the hydroxychloroquine, and it's also obvious from these guidelines that you should try to minimize the use of steroids as much as possible. Now, the reduction of all corticosteroids can be found by using other therapies sooner. So, for instance, having immunosuppressive drugs being used earlier, or biologic agents, where we have several we can choose from now. So, the tapering of all corticosteroids is really emphasized a lot, which I think is a good step for all patients. These drugs are the drugs that we love and the drugs that we hate, because we know they help us a lot. They make us feel better, but they have so many terrible side effects, and we really want to get rid of them. Then there's also not only the goal of having a complete remission, but also to have lupus low disease activity state as a treatment target, which means this is a state that usually means that patients have a better quality of life and they feel less of a burden from their disease, but isn't necessarily complete remission. That there are other ways and other solutions than just looking at complete remission. And that's also a benefit for patients. And that we listen to patients and listen to their priorities and what's important to the individual patient instead of just looking at blood work. Then there's also the last thing, the holistic care of patients is mentioned. I think this is really, it tells a lot, because the holistic care has usually been a term that's sort of been used as a la-di-da term. Sort of, this is something not really for doctors. It's for psychologists or other people, but that the physicians are now seeing it as a more of a holistic job, and not only treating a disease, but treating a person with a disease. I think it's really a good sign. These new guidelines, they can be used, of course, also from the patient side, as I mentioned before, that the patient can know what to expect from their disease management and what to expect from their physician. So they can go back to their physician and say, I can see in these guidelines that this is what I am supposed to be getting. Why am I not getting it? Or there's an alternative I can see to the medication I'm getting. Why am I not on that medication? It might not be possible for the patient to change anything, but at least it gives a good opening to have a discussion with your physician about your treatment and your treatment goals, which I think is the most important thing, that you can agree on a common goal. So it isn't the patient feeling like the physician is trying to drag a treatment on them. Instead, it's a shared decision, as it should be. It's also a really good way of getting priorities right. So get an option for the patient to tell the physician, this is really what I want to do, and this is why. It's something we patients often tend to forget, to actually demand things from our physicians. We don't want to be a bother. We don't want to be a nuisance. So we just don't say anything. And the physician probably knows best, which of course they do. They are the experts. They've been to medical school, but it's your body and it should be your decision which treatment you get. With these guidelines, you have a new tool, a new thing to bring up, and maybe also a bit of pressure on your physician to get better treatments and expect more from your treatments. So at the same time as the patients can expect more from their physicians, we should also expect more from the patients. So you should, as a patient, prepare for your consultations. There are many different tools to do it. For instance, the NVLE in the Netherlands, they've created some consultation cards with a sort of a list to guide you through a consultation. So bringing up the things that are a priority to you. The physicians can't read your mind, and you should make sure that they know what's going on in your life. You should insist on the shared decision making with your physician, and you should also make sure that he or she knows of any issues or wishes you have. It's your responsibility. At the same time, it's also your responsibility to self-manage and take care of yourself from these guidelines as well. So try to live as healthy as you can. Try to keep active and self-manage in the best possible way. So one of the focus areas at the moment for Lupus Europe is the development of a patient charter. For this charter, we've been working together with industry partners and physicians and patient organizations around the world to develop sort of principles for the patients. So what should you expect from your treatment? I would give you the 4 main principles behind this charter. So principle 1, I deserve recognition and understanding of my early symptoms of SLE to drive timely, accurate diagnosis and assessment so that I can receive the best care available as soon as possible. So again, this goes hand in hand with the guidelines before, fits perfectly together, expect more and expect timely diagnosis. So principle 2, I deserve access to information about my SLE so I can play an active role in the management of my condition, minimize flares, and reduce the impact of SLE on my life. Again, this is also in the guidelines. Principle 3, I deserve access to a coordinated multidisciplinary team who fully understands my condition and my experience, regardless of who I am or where I live. So we all know that lupus patients often see more than one physician. The problem is that often these physicians, like the nephrologist, the rheumatologist, the dermatologist, they don't always speak together. So often the communication needs to happen through the patient, which of course is a really bad situation for the patient. For one, you might not know what they actually mean when they talk about a different subject. Your physicians don't always agree on the right treatment for you. So your nephrologist might say one treatment is good for you, while your rheumatologist might say another thing is important to you. And then you are in the middle and you don't know what to do. So the good thing, the good solution would be to have this team who's working around you, also communicating with each other and making sure that the treatment you get is the most appropriate for you. Principle 4, I deserve access to appropriate and comprehensive pharmacological and non-pharmacological care, which reduces the burden of my SLE and allows me to have a high quality of life for as long as possible. All of these things that you can see go really well hand in hand with the guidelines developed by physicians. And I think this is a sign that we're all moving in the same direction. We don't have any solution for these things yet, but we're working on it together. And I think together we will get closer and closer to the right answer. As I mentioned before, self-management is very important. Take care of your own situation, your own life. It is your life, and you deserve to lead a good life. You need to educate yourself on lupus and specifically on your lupus. That means your own symptoms and signs of activity. Talk to your physician whenever you're having a flare. Ask what you need to watch out for. It's, of course, important that you keep active and healthy and stop smoking if you smoke. I know it's difficult. Ask your physician about any ongoing clinical trials that might be relevant for you, so you can help research if you want to and you have enough energy to do it. Seek out your local patient organization. Can also go on the Lupus Europe website and follow our social media for updated information. But in any case, getting keeping yourself informed about the latest treatments, about lupus in general, and your own lupus is very important.